Today on Amazing Dinosaurs, we are checking out a huge collection of dinosaurs invented for the Jurassic World series. First up is this huge, super colossal Indominus Rex. This theropod dinosaur was invented in the first Jurassic World movie and is one of my favorite invented dinosaurs. I've also got the new super colossal Indoraptor figure. And this dinosaur, as you may remember, was invented in the second Jurassic World movie called Fallen Kingdom. And I love the black design with the gold stripe and these massive teeth sticking out of its jaws. Here is another Indoraptor figure, but a whole lot smaller, and this one is actually part of the Dino Trackers series. And you can tell that it's still a black color, but it actually has a reflective blue shine over its whole body as well. And it has a chomping action when you move the arms, and when you press the button on its back. Next up here, I've got another super massive Indominus Rex figure. But this one's pretty special because it is actually the battle damaged edition. So by pressing this button on its back, you can actually turn the battle damage on and off. And not only that, but it has a button that activates the jaw too. This next dinosaur is a Tyrannosaurus Rex figure, but it is actually a hybrid T-Rex. Now, you won't see this in the movie. This was just a figure created during the first Jurassic World movie, but it's a pretty cool hybrid figure because it actually has these spikes that pop out of its back right here and along the top of its head. Plus, there is a chomping button to activate the jaw. For the next Jurassic World invented dinosaur, I've got another Indoraptor here, one of the most popular invented dinosaurs. This figure specifically is the basic version, so it still has the really cool black with the gold striping coloring, but it's a lot more simple in its design, so you can move the arms, the legs, and the tail, but there is no jaw chomping action or anything like that. Next up is another really cool Indominus Rex figure. Now, you won't see this one in the Jurassic World movies, and that's because this one was actually custom painted, so this one is a super special, super unique dinosaur figure. It's got the blue underbelly that fades into this purple, and then it has the orange striping with the black on top. Super unusual for this dinosaur species. Plus, it has a button on its tail to activate the jaw. And check that out, even inside its mouth, it has a little cavity there so you can feed it smaller dinosaurs. For example, let's try this little Velociraptor figure, and we're gonna feed him to the Indoraptor, and his mouth still closes. Next up is a Dilophosaurus figure. Now, I know you're thinking, wait a sec, Dilophosauruses are real. However, I would say that this dinosaur was at least in part invented because in real life, Dilophosauruses don't have these huge face frills, nor do they spit venom out of their mouth. So the Dilophosaurus was partially invented for the Jurassic Park and the Jurassic World series. Next up is another really cool Indominus Rex figure. This one's slightly smaller than the rest, and this one specifically is from the new Dino Trackers series. So it features fully posable arms and legs, and with the tail, you can actually move that back and forth to move the head back and forth. And there's a button on its tail as well for the jaw-chomping action. Alright, here is the first Scorpius Rex of this invented dinosaurs from Jurassic World collection. And this dinosaur sure is pretty scary looking. It's got these huge claws on its front arms. It also has the poisonous quills on its tail. And the tail on this figure is actually spring-loaded, so you can swing it back and forth. And there's two action buttons on this figure. The first activates the jaw. And check out that crazy design of the teeth. There's like larger teeth that stick out and then a bunch of smaller teeth on the inside. And the second button activates the arms for slashing back and forth. Next up here, I've got one of my most special Indominus Rex figures, and this one is pretty rare now. This is a hybrid Indominus Rex figure. You can tell by the red coloring all over its body. It's got some spikes on its back, and actually some hidden spikes that pop out. This hybrid I-Rex has some unique horns on the top of its head, and this figure is battery operated, so you can pull on its arm and it activates the jaw-chomping action. Next up, I don't have an invented dinosaur, but this is a new figure from the Dino Trackers series. This is the Dino Trackers Borealopelta. This is one really interesting looking dinosaur. It reminds me partially of an Ankylosaurus because it has this huge armor plating over its entire back. But you'll notice that it has a much longer neck compared to an Ankylosaurus, and it's got these huge spikes sticking out of its shoulders too. One part that I really like are all these spikes right on its neck. It's got multiple rows. All in all, it's a pretty cool looking figure, although it is disappointing that it doesn't have an attack feature. Next up is a vintage Jurassic Park figure. This one is really crazy looking and is called the Velociraptorix. So as you can tell by the name, it is a hybrid Velociraptor, and it looks like they changed a lot about its body shape, and it looks like they added these crazy feather kind of spike things all over its body. So this figure is very unique in its design, and I don't think you'll find another dinosaur that looks like this one. Here's another Indoraptor figure. This figure specifically is called the Grab and Growl Indoraptor. It was released for the Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom movie. And this one's pretty cool because you can move the tail to move the torso back and forth. There's also a button to activate its claws for slashing, and a button to activate its jaw too. And check that out, even its eyes light up too. Next up is a hybrid Stegoceratops figure. This dinosaur was invented for the first Jurassic World movie, and I don't think you'll see it in the movie, but it was invented for the toy line. So it's got this really cool bright blue coloring with the gold spines and the gold horns all over the front of its face too. Plus it has an attack feature that when you move its tail back and forth, it moves its head back and forth for a stabbing action. Here's another Scorpius Rex figure, but this is the basic edition. So just like the Indoraptor that we saw earlier, you can move the arms, the legs, and the tail, but there is no attack feature, although it still has some pretty good texturing and coloring for being a basic figure. Here's another Indominus Rex, but I believe that this one is from the Feeding Frenzy collection. So its body shape is totally different. It's got a much smaller body, smaller legs, smaller arms, but its head is quite large. It's got an action button on its nose that you can press, give some sound effects. And by pressing on the tail, you can actually open up the jaw, and then when you press down on the tongue, it actually snaps its jaw shut, and it has more sound effects, and its eyes light up too. Here is a hybrid T-Rex and Dilophosaurus figure. This figure is from the first Jurassic World movie, and like the Stegoceratops, you won't see it in the movie, but they created this figure as part of the toy line. And it's got some really cool coloring with the gold and black and orange, and you can use the tail to control the face. Next up is the Sound Surge Indominus Rex figure. This figure is quite a bit smaller compared to many of my other iRex figures, but it has some pretty cool sound effects that you can activate by pressing the button. Next up is another vintage figure from Jurassic Park. This is the Compsognathus. So this is a hybrid dinosaur. I think it actually has a few different dinosaurs mixed into it, and it's got some pretty crazy coloring. Got the black, this soft green, yellow, orange, and the bright blue on its face. Plus it's got this hidden action button in its back here that when you press on it, it shoots this out, which I think might be its tongue. Next up is another Indoraptor figure released for the Fallen Kingdom series. It's got some pretty cool coloring and design, much like the other ones, and its body is fully posable. You can move the arms, the hands, the legs, the feet, the tail, and of course, the head and the jaw. Here is the last Indominus Rex figure of this collection. This one is quite a bit older, and it actually has a battle damage feature on the side that you can open and close, just like a door. In addition to that, you can also move the tail up and down to activate the jaw chomping action. And I've got another Dilophosaurus figure in here. Just like I said before, Dilophosauruses are real, but the frills that Jurassic Park added onto them is unfortunately not a real thing. So this Dilophosaurus with the frills is invented. And then finally, I've got two teeny tiny invented dinosaurs. I've got an Indoraptor figure right here in the crawling position, still got that really cool gold stripe. And here I've got a completely see-through Indominus Rex figure. That's really cool. It looks like it's almost made out of ice or something. Plus, despite how small it is, you can still open and close its jaw. And here is the entire collection of the Jurassic World invented dinosaurs. Which of these invented dinosaurs is your favorite? Is it the Indominus Rex? Is it the Indoraptors? Is it the Scorpius Rexes? Or is it another one of these crazy invented dinosaurs? Let me know in the comments below. The first unusual species is this Eocarcharia figure from the new Dino Trackers series. It's got a fantastic feathering texture over its whole body and a single lever action on its back for the chomping and roaring. Next up is the mighty Yangchuanosaurus figure. This has the green and brown coloring, and you can use the tail to control the head and open and close the jaw. Here is the Irritator dinosaur, and I think it's from the Dino Trackers series. This figure has some really cool coloring, and that same action button on its back for the chomping and roaring. Next up is this huge Quetzalcoatlus figure. If you're a big fan of the movies, you might remember this species in the Jurassic World Dominion movie. And it's got one button on its back for flapping its wings, and another button for moving its neck up and down and opening and closing its jaws. Right over here, I've got the Siamosaurus figure. This dinosaur walks on all four legs, and you can use the tail to move the head around and open and close the jaw. Next is a little bit of an older figure. This is a Concavinator figure. It's got this huge hump on its back that's red and purple, and its entire face is purple. And there's an action button on its back for a chomping action, and you can press on its spike to swing its tail back and forth. This aquatic dinosaur is called the Elasmosaurus. It's got a soft blue body, which I bet camouflages really well in the water, and it has two action buttons on its back. One swings its neck side to side, and the other moves its neck up and down. Here is the Proceratosaurus figure. This is the basic edition, so you can move its tail, its legs, and its arm, but sadly there is no action button. Still has some pretty cool coloring though. Next up is the Suchomimus figure. This version is in the yellow and brown, and it has two buttons on its back, one for chomping its jaw, and the other for swinging its tail. And I've actually got the other Suchomimus figure in here. This one is in the blue and yellow coloring. And this figure actually only has one action button, and that is for the chomping action. Check out this crazy looking figure. This is a Diabloceratops from the new Dino Trackers series. It's got the all red body, some gigantic horns on its head. It's got some sound effects, and the lever on its back for the action. Here's a slightly smaller dinosaur, but still pretty scary looking. This is the Majingasaurus dinosaur with the green, yellow, and blue coloring. And while you have to open and close its mouth manually on this figure, you can still use the tail to control the neck and the head. This next figure is from the new Dino Trackers series. This is the Orcaraptor figure. It has some feather texturing on part of its body. It also has these massive claws on its front arms. And just like all the other Dino Tracker figures, has this lever on its back for the roaring and the chomping action. Next up, I've got an Albertosaurus figure in the green and orange coloring. And with this figure, you can move the tail around to twist the neck back and forth and to chomp the jaw. This next uncommon species is a crazy looking carnivore figure. This is a Tarbosaurus. Check out that red underneath its chin and all these huge spikes running down its back. Plus, you can use the tail to twist the neck around and open and close the jaw. This next figure is also quite large. This species is called a Ceops microrarum. It has the orange coloring on the sides and underbelly, and the dark blue on top, with all these rows of spikes on its head and on its back. And of course, its special feature is that you can use the tail to twist the neck around and open and close its jaw. Check out those really cool teeth. Next up is an herbivore figure. This is a Sinoceratops figure, and this version comes in the soft green coloring with some tan detailing and dark orange. And with this Sinoceratops figure, you can use the tail to move its head around in all sorts of directions. Check it out, it's another herbivore figure. This uncommon species is called an Ouranosaurus. It has a huge spine running along the top of its back and some really cool coloring. It's got the green on its body, bright yellow, orange, and even some blue on its face. And it has this action button on its side for moving its head and sound effects. Right over here, I've got the Ankylosaurus figure. Now this one is a bit older of a figure, but it's still pretty uncommon of a species. And it has two action buttons on its back. The first moves its head up and down, and the second button activates its tail for swinging back and forth. All right, here's another carnivore. This is a Cryolophosaurus figure, and this version is the yellow one with the brown coloring and the huge crown on the top of its head. And with this figure, although you have to open and close its mouth manually, you can still use the tail to move its neck around. This next four-legged dinosaur is called a Nigersaurus. It's got the 2 tones of green on its body, and since it's from the Dino Tracker series, it has this special feature button on its back used for moving its head in all sorts of directions. This next uncommon species is called a Dryptosaurus figure, also from the new Dino Tracker series. It's got more dark coloring over most of its body, and it's got spikes all over on its head, on its back, and a bunch on its tail as well. And it's got the action button on its back for chomping and sound effects. This next figure is called the Gigant Spinosaurus dinosaur. It looks kind of like a Stegosaurus because it has those frills on its back, but it also has these huge spines coming out of its shoulder too. And it is actually spring-loaded so that when you move the head back and forth, it actually swings the tail back and forth too. Next up, I've got the Piatsnitskisaurus. It's got some pretty cool blue coloring over its whole body, and also some red, some orange, and some light green. Next up is the Nothosaurus dinosaur. It's a pretty weird looking species. It's got some short legs and a really long neck and narrow snout. Here is the Shringosaurus dinosaur in the yellow and brown coloring. It walks on all 4 legs, and it has this massive pair of horns on the top of its head. Next up is the Austroraptor dinosaur figure. It comes in the tan and brown coloring and has a bit of dark orange along the top of its head, and it has a really long and narrow snout. Next up is a Herrerasaurus, which you might have heard before, but this is actually a pretty new figure and looks quite a bit different compared to the old version. Plus, it has an action button on its back for a chomping motion. This is the Geniodecticyrus figure. This version comes in the dark brown and yellow coloring, and it also has an action button on its back for opening and closing its jaw. Here is another aquatic dinosaur. This one is called the Tanystropheus figure. It's got some short little legs that you can adjust and a bright blue body, and when you move the tail up and down, it actually swings its neck way down to the bottom. Now here's a crazy looking dinosaur. This uncommon species is called a Scutosaurus. It's got a bright orange body and it walks on all 4s, and check out these huge horns underneath its chin. I've got a few more winged dinosaurs in here. This species is called Rhamphorhynchus. It's got some bright yellow-green wings and a bunch of crazy looking teeth in its mouth. This next dinosaur species is called the Zungdaripterus. It's got bright yellow wings and a brown body, and you can actually see feather texturing all over its wings too. Plus, it's got a pretty unique looking face and jaw. Next up is a Dracorex figure. This one is colored bright green with some gray striping, and check out all those horns on the back of its head. Oh, you know what? I've got another winged dinosaur in here. This one is called the Tapehara. It's got a lot of orange and some green on its body, but the coolest part is this face. Check that out. Plus, there's a button on its back to flap its wings. The next dinosaur is an Elaphrosaurus figure. It comes in the blue coloring with some yellow and dark brown detailing. Check out those huge horns on the top of its head. Here is the extreme battle damage Quilmosaurus figure. It has the light green body with the dark green on top and the bright red chin. And check out that battle damage on the side that you can click on and off. Alright, I've got another aquatic dinosaur. This one is called the Plesiosaurus. It's got a dark green body with the white underneath, also to camouflage in the ocean, and a single action button on its back to move its fins. This next uncommon figure is the Masiakasaurus dinosaur. It has the dark red body with the yellow spotting all over, and spotting is pretty unusual for these dinosaur figures, and the single action button on its back for chomping its jaw. This is the Rugops primus figure. It has some feather texturing over its body and the soft green coloring on its body with the black on its tail and on its face. Here is the Miragaia figure. This figure looks quite a bit like a Stegosaurus, but this one also has the huge spikes coming out of its shoulders and a lot more spikes on its tail too. And here is a Pachycephalosaurus figure. I believe this one is from the Legacy collection, and this figure has a special feature that when you press down on its tail, it has the headbutting action. This little dinosaur here is called a Troodon. It has the pink underbelly and gray on the sides and the black spine and the black along the top of its head too. Next up is the Protoceratops figure. There's a few versions of this, and this one is in the bright green with yellow accenting. This figure I believe is called the Sauropelta. It has some huge spikes coming out of its shoulders and is actually spring-loaded so you can swing its shoulders back and forth with those huge spikes. Here's a crazy looking figure. This is actually a hybrid dinosaur from the first Jurassic World movie. This is a Triceratops and Stegosaurus hybrid. Check out that battle damage right on the side too. And it even has an action button. When you press down its tail, you get a stabbing action with its head. And last of all, I've got the Zuniceratops figure. This is a newer version that is in the brown coloring with the tan and black on its face, and it has a single action button for a stabbing action. This first figure, however, is not from Dino Trackers. This is actually part of the 30th anniversary Jurassic Park collection. This is the real feel T-Rex figure designed to look like the old Jurassic Park one. The skin on its body is soft and rubbery, and it actually can eat smaller dinosaurs and store them in its stomach compartment. Next up is the Dino Trackers Indoraptor figure. This version is slightly larger than many of my other Indoraptor figures, and it has some roaring actions with its arms, and it has an action button on its back too. Here is the Epic Attack Carnotaurus figure. It's around the same size as many of my other Carnotaurus figures, and it features the red body with the brown top and a single action button on its back to operate its jaw. But best of all, there's these action buttons on its side for more sound effects and lights too. Here is the Dino Trackers Diabloceratops figure. It comes in a bright red coloring over all its body and has some massive horns, and it has an action on its back to swing its head back and forth. Next up is the Dino Trackers Sinotyrannus figure. It comes with this cool headset that you can take off of the dinosaur figure, and it has some pretty cool coloring, and it has two buttons. One activates its head, and the other button activates its tail. Right over here is the Dino Trackers Eocarcharia. This dinosaur has feather texturing over all its body. It's got some pretty bright coloring and the bright red along its face, and an action on its back to swing its head back and forth. This is the Gigantic Trackers Stegosaurus figure. It has some really cool coloring over all of its body. It's quite different from all the other Stegosaurus figures that I have. And of course it comes with the tracker backpack and two action buttons on its back. One swings its tail up and down, and the other swings it side to side. Here is the Dino Trackers Nigersaurus figure. This dinosaur stands on all four legs and has some pretty bright green on the front and darker green in the back. And there's one single action button on its back to move its head back and forth. Here's our first aquatic dinosaur of the collection. This is the Kronosaurus. It has the dark blue top and the yellow underbelly, and you can adjust all its fins and its tail too, and it has a single action on its back to operate its jaw. Next up is the Edaphosaurus figure. It looks pretty similar to a Dimetrodon with a huge spine on its back and standing on all four legs, but its spine is even a bit larger than a Dimetrodon's, and with this figure you can use the tail to move the head back and forth. Alright, now it's time for some ones that I haven't even opened up yet. This is the Orcoraptor figure. This is a pretty bulky looking figure. You can see that it has some feather texturing along the underside of its body, but not really along the top. You can tell that it's kind of a skin texture. And kind of like the Therizinosaurus, it has these huge claws on its hands. It's got some pretty bright accenting design on its tail, but not really anywhere else, which is interesting. But there is some right around its eyes too. And it looks like the arms, the legs, and the tail are adjustable, and there's an action button on its back to operate its jaw. Next up of the unopened figures is this Irritator figure. I think I have one or two other Irritator figures, so I'm excited to add this to my collection. All right, here it is. And I gotta say, it looks even a bit different compared to my other Irritator figures. Its legs seem to be a lot shorter, whereas its body is super long. It has this really long tail. And of course, it still has the spine that runs from its back down its tail. And it has some pretty cool coloring too, with the dark brown in the back and on its legs, the orange in the middle, and then some bright green along its head and its neck too. And it looks like its arms and its legs and its tail are adjustable, and there's that single action button on its back to operate its jaw. And the next unopened figure is this Regaloceratops. Let's go ahead and open it up and check it out. So obviously it looks quite a bit like a Triceratops. It stands on all four legs, it's got the horns on the front, as well as these additional horns along the top of its frill, and it's even got some spikes running down its back and its tail too. This is a pretty bright dinosaur as well. Most of it is that yellow color. It has some green along its face and along its back, and it looks like all four legs are adjustable. You can twist the tail around a bit, and it has an action button on its back for roar sound effects. Up next is the Dino Tracker's Dryptosaurus figure. It has fairly dark coloring with the dark brown over most of its body and then the green accenting on its arms and on its tail as well. And boy, does this figure have tons of spikes along its body. And there's the action button to control the jaw and the sound effects. Over here is the Hammond Collection Baryonyx figure. It features a fully posable body on all of its limbs and has the classic blue coloring with the white stripe and the gray underbelly. Here's another Hammond Collection figure. This is the Concavinator. It too has a fully posable body with all of its limbs, and it features some pretty cool coloring with some bright orange along parts of it, the dark blue, the lighter underbelly, and some cool detailing around its eyes. Here is the Dino Tracker's Zuniceratops figure. This version of the Zuniceratops has the brown body with some tan and black along its neck and an action button to activate its head. This next Dino Tracker's figure, I believe, is called the Elaphrosaurus. It features a bright blue body with some yellow accenting along the side and a darker face with some horns on the top, and it looks like its whole body is adjustable as well. The arms, the legs, the tail, the neck, and the jaw. Here is the Dino Tracker's Herrerasaurus figure, and this Herrerasaurus looks quite a bit different compared to the older versions by Jurassic World. It features posable arms, legs, and tail, and an action button on its back for the chomping. This next figure is the Dino Tracker's Austroraptor. This version features the tan body with some brown detailing and some brighter coloring around its head. And overall, it's shaped like a velociraptor, but the biggest difference is the shape of its head and its jaw. Here is the Dino Tracker's Strike Attack Gigant Spinosaurus. This figure looks kind of like a Miragaia with the spines along its back and the huge spikes coming out of its shoulders, but it has a different shaped head, and this one has the orange coloring in the front and the tan in the back. Plus it has an action that when you move its head back and forth, it moves its tail too. Next up is the Dino Tracker's Strike Attack Dilophosaurus figure. This figure has very muted colors. It only has white, some black as well, and I think that's pretty much it. But it still has this really cool feature that when you move its tail, it activates its frills. Now here is the Hammond Collection Dilophosaurus figure. It looks quite a bit different compared to the Strike Attack figure that we just saw, but this figure is actually pretty cool because you can actually remove the frill to reveal just the head by itself, which apparently is a more realistic look for the Dilophosaurus in real life. Back here is the Hammond Collection Ceratosaurus figure. It features the fully posable body, has some pretty cool coloring over its whole body, and of course has the little horn on the top of its head. Here is the Dino Tracker's Baby Brachiosaurus figure. I have a few other versions of this figure, and this one is in the brown coloring with the tan accenting along its back. Here is the Epic Attack Dilophosaurus figure, a little bit larger than many of my other Dilophosauruses. And interestingly, on this figure, you can't move the frills at all, but there is this action button on its side to activate some sounds and some light effects. Looks like here's another Zuniceratops figure from Dino Trackers. We've seen this one already. This one from Dino Trackers I believe is called Geniodectes cirrus. Features some bright coloring with the yellow that runs from its tail through its underbelly up to its face, and then the brown along the rest of its body. And it has an action button on its back to operate the jaw. Next up is a miniature Hammond Collection Velociraptor figure. It of course is extremely posable all over its body. It has a single stripe that runs down its entire side, and it's got some cool blue coloring right around its eyes too. And finally, here is the Dino Trackers Strike Attack Atrociraptor figure. This Atrociraptor has some bright yellow along the front, and then the back is a dark green color. It's also got some reflective silver coloring right around its eyes, and a single action button on its back to operate its head. You may be thinking you haven't seen this one before, and that is because it is custom painted. It is an I-Rex in a camouflage green color. And check out that super bloody mouth too. Next up of my newest figures, we've got the Dino Tracker Indoraptor figure. And it features some attack slashing actions and an attack button on its back too. The next new figure is this Wild Roar Eocarcharia figure. It features the feather texturing all over its body. It's got some bright coloring along its head and a slide lever action for different chomps and sound effects. Next up of these new figures is, I believe, the Chronosaurus. This dinosaur is an aquatic dinosaur, so it has 4 fins. It's got these huge teeth in its mouth and a slide lever action for some roaring sound effects and chomping motions. Next up, I've got a medium-sized Sinotyrannus figure from the Dino Trackers series. You can see this huge headpiece, and it also has 2 action buttons on its back. One moves its jaws, and the other swings its tail. Next up of the new figures is this epic Attack Carnotaurus figure. It has the classic orange-red coloring all over its body, and the special part is it's got these 2 action buttons for battle damage and sound effects. And not only that, but it also has a jaw-chomping action. Here's an even larger figure. This is the Extreme Battle Damage Allosaurus figure. This is the largest Allosaurus I have, and you can check out that Extreme Battle Damage right there on its side. Plus, it also has an action button on its back for sound effects and chomping. Here's another T-Rex I bet you haven't seen before. That's because this is another custom colored one. This is a battle damage T-Rex. You can see the battle damage turned on and off on its side, and it is custom colored into the camo green. It's really cool. Next up is one that I bought just a couple weeks ago. This is a Scorpiovenator in totally new coloring. It's mostly brown and has some orange detailing running along its neck and its head. And this Scorpiovenator actually came as a pack with this Iguanodon figure. And check it out, they both have an attack button when you press down on its back. I think we all know this next one. This is the Therizinosaurus figure from Jurassic World Dominion. It features these huge claws in its hands, and you can use the tail to swing the torso back and forth, and use the button for an attack action. This dinosaur is the new Diabloceratops from the Dino Trackers series. It is the only Triceratops-looking dinosaur that I have that has this bright red coloring, and it's got a ginormous frill on the front of its head too. Plus, there is a little button on its back for sound effects and attack movements. This next figure is a Tyrannosaurus Rex, and this one I got just a week ago, and it is custom colored to look way more lifelike. Plus, they added a bunch more battle damage. And this is the Terran T-Rex, so it has the button on its back for the tearing action. Next, why don't we grab these huge figures way in the back. I can't even show this full one on camera, it's so big. This is the Dreadnoughtus figure, and it is probably one of the largest and longest figures that I have. Just look at the size of this thing. This is crazy. Next up in the back here is another huge one, but not quite as large. This is the Apatosaurus figure, and it too has a pretty long neck and a long tail, and you can still move its head around and open and close its mouth. I think that's a pretty cool detail for how big this figure is. All right, let's see what's next here. This is the Hammond Collection Ceratosaurus. It has the classic coloring for Ceratosauruses, and it features very posable arms, legs, tail, neck, and of course, the mouth. Here's another Hammond Collection figure. This is the Concavenator, and this figure looks pretty wild. It's got an interesting looking spine coming out of half of its back, and it's got a huge orange tail, and of course is extremely posable. Let's keep going with these Hammond Collection figures. This one is the Baryonyx, and just like the others, is super posable and features the gray coloring with the dark blue on top. This next figure is a bit smaller. This is the Strike Attack Zunoceratops. This, I think, is the second version of the Zunoceratops, and this one features the brown coloring with some tan and black, and it has an action button on its back. Next up is the Edaphosaurus figure. This figure reminds me of a Dimetrodon because of the huge spine along its back, but I think this dinosaur spine might be even a little bit larger. And it features an action where you can move the tail to twist the head back and forth. Over here, I've got the giant Dino Trackers Stegosaurus figure. It comes with the backpack that I have attached right here, and it has totally different coloring compared to the other Stegosaurus figures that I have. Plus, it features 2 buttons on its back, both to move its tail. This is the Hammond Collection Ankylosaurus figure. It is quite a bit larger than the other Ankylosaurus figures I've got and is very posable. You can even open and close its mouth. Here is a Triceratops figure from the Jurassic World Dominion series. It's got the green body with the dark green on its head and the orange right along the front too. Over here is the Irritator Raptor. This one is super brightly colored. It has an interesting spine running down its back and on both sides of its tail. And on this figure, if you press down, you get a chomping action. Here is the Wild Roar Dryptosaurus dinosaur figure. It's got spikes all over its tail, running up its back, up to its head, and it has an action on its back that you can use for chomping actions. This weird looking dinosaur figure is the Siamosaurus. It stands on all 4 legs and has a dark blue body with a spine on its back, kind of like a Spinosaurus. And on this figure, the tail controls the head and the jaw. We saw one Scorpiovenator earlier that had different coloring. This was the original one, and I believe this one is from Jurassic World Dominion. It has the yellow sides with the dark blue top and the white detailing. And of course, when you press down on its back, you get a chomping action. Here is the Ampulosaurus figure in the orange coloring with the brown on top. And like many other figures, the tail controls the head and the jaw. I've also got a few Rajasaurus figures in here. I believe this one was the earlier version with the brown coloring and the dark blue. And this one is a bit more recent. It's dark blue all over its body and it has the white along its neck and its chin. This is an extremely recent one. This is the Epic Attack Dilophosaurus. This figure is a little bit larger than most of my Dilophosauruses. It has the dark green body and the attack button right here on the side. It's pretty cool that it lights up, but sadly on this figure, you cannot open or close the frills. I think that's a pretty big bummer. Here is the Austroraptor figure. You can tell it looks pretty similar to a Velociraptor, but it has a much longer and narrower snout. Speaking of raptors, here's another one. This is a Megaraptor figure. It comes in the red and dark blue coloring, and when you press down on its body, you get a chomp action. This is the Sound Surge IREX figure. It's a lot smaller than many of my IREX figures, but it still has some pretty decent detailing and of course the sound effects. Next up for the new figures, I've got a Nothosaurus dinosaur. This is a pretty long and short dinosaur, but it's got some gnarly teeth. Check that out. This next figure is the Elaphrosaurus dinosaur in the bright blue. It's got some yellow-green coloring, and it features posable arms, legs, tail, neck, and head too. Next up is the extreme damage Geniodectes Cirrus. While most of its body is this dark gray coloring, it has bright blue and red on the top of its head, and of course the battle damage on the side. And here's another Geniodectes Cirrus. This is not the battle damage edition, and it has different coloring too. Plus this one has an action button to chomp its jaw. I've got quite a few more extreme damage dinosaurs. This is the Atrociraptor extreme damage version. This Atrociraptor is in the white and dark blue, and of course, check out that battle damage. The next extreme damage dinosaur, I believe, is pronounced the Coeluris. It comes in dark green and dark red, and the battle damage, of course. The final extreme damage that I have of my new figures is this Pyroraptor. It is in the classic red with black, and of course, there's the battle damage. I've also got a little baby Stegosaurus here, and this one is in the bright green. It's even got some gold around its eyes, and the red spines. And finally for my new figures is the Rugops Primus dinosaur. It has feather texturing all over its body, and you can pose the arms, the legs, the neck, and the jaw. First up, we've got this huge Indominus Rex hybrid figure. While most Indominus Rex figures are painted just gray, this one has some crazy red, some gold on the underbelly and arms and legs, and it has a few unique action buttons too. The first is a chomping action, and second is a button that reveals even more spikes on its back. Next up, we've got another Indominus Rex figure. This one is normal colored, but it's pretty old. It's got a rubberized head and neck, and the rest of its body is a hard plastic. And when you pull down on the arms, it opens and closes its mouth. This next rare figure is a Tyrannosaurus Rex. It also has some rubberized parts of its body as well, like the tail and the neck. This figure also has some stomp sound effects. And of course, it's got a roar sound effect and a chomp action. In the back here, we've got another T-Rex figure, but this one looks quite a bit different. It's got some green and some very unique and kind of strange looking details on its body. It's a bit smaller than the T-Rex that we just saw, but it has one real cool special effect. Press the button here, and it springs up some spikes on its back and on the top of its head too. This next T-Rex right here is actually identical to the other one, except that it does not have the spikes coming out of its back. And I believe this one was actually custom colored too, so you won't find this one anywhere else. This is a super brightly colored dinosaur. This is a classic Dilophosaurus. It's got bright neon coloring all over its body. It's got a button on its side for lighting up and sound effects, although it doesn't work anymore. And you can use the tail to move the head up and down too. Here's a super brightly colored Velociraptor figure. It's got the green with the red stripes all over its body. This one also has a button for sound effects and lighting up, although it doesn't work anymore. And not only that, but it also has a tail that you can press down on to open and close its mouth. Here's a pretty unique looking dinosaur. This is an Amargosaurus. It stands on all four legs and it has two action buttons. One moves its head up and down, and the other swings its tail. Check out those two huge spines running down its back and its neck. Next up, we've got an Edmontosaurus figure. This one's a bit more recent, but it can be pretty hard to find. The brightest coloring is on the top of its head. It's got some blue and some yellow, and you can hear the sound effects, and there's a tail that moves its head around too. Check it out, we've got another Indominus Rex figure. This one's quite a bit smaller than the ones that we saw earlier, although it's got some really cool battle damage that you can slide open and closed. Plus, on this figure, you can move the tail up and down, and it has a chomping action. Here's another super brightly colored dinosaur. This is a hybrid Stegosaurus and Triceratops. Check out all that super cool gold coloring all over its body, and it's even got some battle damage right on the side. And this figure has one action. When you press down on the tail, it pushes its head forward. Here is a winged dinosaur. I'm not sure what type it is. It's definitely not a pteranodon or anything like that. It's got a bright blue underbelly. It's got the red on the top. It's got an action button right on its back. And you can flap the wings by moving the back feet. Up next is a miniature Mosasaurus figure. This small figure has some battle damage that you can open and close right on the side. And although it doesn't work anymore, you used to be able to lift the tail up to open and close the mouth. Here is the Concavinator figure. This dinosaur has some bright coloring along its back right next to the spike and some purple all over its face. Plus it has two action buttons, one to activate the jaw and the other to activate the tail. Right here is a special edition Ankylosaurus figure. This figure is pretty special because you can actually remove part of the shell on top of its body as well as on its tail, and underneath you can see that there's still a super hard shell for this dinosaur. And with this figure, when you move this leg back and forth, it swings its tail and it moves its head back and forth. Right here we've got a classic looking Ceratosaurus figure with a button for battle damage on the side. This figure is a bit smaller than many of my other Ceratosaurus figures, but you can still use the tail to open and close the mouth. Up next, we've got a reflective Parasaurolophus figure. Check out that super shiny pink coloring along its back and some on its leg as well. And this figure has an action where you can move the tail to move the head around. Plus, it has sound effects too. I've got another Velociraptor figure here. This one isn't as bright as the last one we saw, but it's still got the battle damage button right on the side that used to light up and have sound effects. Plus on this figure, you can move the tail up and down to move the arms. I've got one more Dilophosaurus figure in this super rare collection. This one is identical to the one we saw earlier, except that it does not have the super bright neon coloring. It's got the huge frills in the front, there's the battle damage button on the side, and you can use the tail to dip the head up and down too. This next dinosaur, I believe, is called a Pachycephalosaurus. It's yellow with black striping along the top. It's got a tiny bit of battle damage on the side, and it's got an action that when you press down on the tail, it does a headbutting action for its super hard shell on its head. Next up, we've got a super small Spinosaurus figure with super bright coloring. It's blue on the side, it's like a reflective gold on the underbelly, and bright red along the spine. It's also got the battle damage on the side, and you can use this figure's tail to move its head around. Next up is a small Allosaurus figure, once again, really brightly colored. It's got tan, yellow, and red on its body. It's got a little bit of battle damage on its side, just like the other figures, and the tail that controls the mouth and the head. And finally, we've got 3 Tyrannosaurus Rex figures. This middle one is for sure the rarest one. It is a super bright orange color. It's got some gold coloring along the top. And this T-Rex is actually a hybrid with a Dilophosaurus. You can tell because of those huge frills on the front right there. And these other two are a little bit more normal looking. They both got the battle damage right on the side. This first one is a light green color, and this one is a light brown color. And they both have the tail that controls the mouth when you move it around. The first figure is this giant Tyrannosaurus Rex. It's got a dark green body with the yellow underbelly and the black top, and a button that activates the jaw. This figure is the Dino Tracker series Indoraptor. Check it out. And there's a button on its back that activates the jaw too. Here is the Camp Cretaceous Spinosaurus. This figure is ginormous, and it's got the button at the top of its head to activate the jaw. Over here we've got another Tyrannosaurus Rex figure. This one's a little bit smaller. It's got the brown coloring and the jaw attack button. This is the Dino Tracker's Sinotyrannus figure. It's got 2 buttons on its back, one to activate the jaw and one to activate the tail. Here is the Suchomimus figure with the dark blue and yellow coloring. It's got the big spine running down its back and an attack button for its jaw. Here is an old Jurassic World figure. This one was actually custom painted to be red and black, and it has an action button on its back to activate the jaw. This is the Carcharodontosaurus figure with the blue, orange, and brown coloring. This is the Albertosaurus figure in the green and orange coloring, and it has an attack button on its tail to operate the jaw. Next up is the Sound Surge Tyrannosaurus Rex from Jurassic World Dominion. Here's another Dino Trackers figure. This is the Diabloceratops. Check out that awesome red coloring and this action button that moves its head. This Pteranodon figure, I believe, is part of the Amber collection. It actually has rubberized wings, so it feels really realistic. This is the Rowdy Roars Carnotaurus figure. It's got the classic coloring for a Carnotaurus and an action button for chomping. Here is the gigantic tracker Stegosaurus. It comes with this cool backpack feature, and it has two buttons on its back that swing the tail up and down and back and forth. Here is a classic Baryonyx figure with the reflective blue coloring on the top of its head. Next up, we've got a Cryolophosaurus figure in the bright yellow coloring with the brown and orange detailing. This figure right here is a Spinosaurus. This is a basic figure, so there's not a whole lot you can do with it, but you can move its arms, its legs, and its tail. Here from Jurassic World Dominion is an Iguanodon figure. It's got the soft tan coloring and an attack button when you press down on its back. This figure is a Kentrosaurus. It looks quite a bit like a Stegosaurus, but it's got these huge spikes on the side that you can swing back and forth. This figure, I believe, is called an Edmontosaurus. It's got some pretty cool coloring, and you can use the tail to control the head. Next up, we've got a basic Velociraptor figure in the orange color. You can move its arms, its legs, and its tail. Here is the dark green Ceratosaurus figure. It has a slide lever action on its back to activate the sound effects and its chomping action. This is a Triceratops figure in the brown, blue, and dark blue coloring. And on this figure, you can move the tail to move the head around. Here is an older and pretty rare Jurassic World figure. This is a hybrid Tyrannosaurus and Dilophosaurus. And check out that super bright coloring. Up next, we've got a Sinoceratops figure in the soft green coloring. And this figure features the tail that you can use to move the head around. This next figure is an Allosaurus in the gray and yellow coloring, and it has an attack button on its back to chomp its jaw open and closed. Here's a dinosaur figure that I don't have that many of. This is a Concavinator. It's got a huge spine on its back that actually you can press to swing its tail back and forth. Plus, there's an action button on the front of its back to chomp its jaw open and closed. Here is a Pteranodon figure with foldable wings. And when it's fully expanded, it's probably over a foot long. Plus, there's a button on its back to flap its wings back and forth. Here is a miniature Indominus Rex figure with a little bit of battle damage on its side. I've also got this older Jurassic World Allosaurus figure, and it looks quite a bit different from the new Allosaurus figures that Mattel is releasing. Up next is a miniature Dilophosaurus figure with the purple and some bright yellow, red, and orange. This is a Moros Intrepidus figure from Jurassic World Dominion. It's got the green, orange, and white body. Here is a Velociraptor Beta figure. It's got the classic blue stripe down both sides, and you can move its arms, its legs, and its tail too. Next, I've got a battle damage Atrociraptor figure. Check it out, you can turn on and off the battle damage with the click of a button. Here is a Pachycephalosaurus figure in the orange and green coloring, and it has an action. We press down on the tail and it headbutts. Check out this crazy looking dinosaur. I actually can't remember the name of it, so let me know in the comments below if you know what it is. Here is a super bright Velociraptor figure with the red and the green stripes on top. Plus, it's actually spring-loaded. Up next, I've got a Zuniceratops figure with the green and dark blue coloring. Check out those huge horns on the top of its head, too. Here's another spring-loaded Velociraptor. This one is brown, though. Up next is a small Parasaurolophus figure. And actually what comes with this figure is a Dr. Ian Malcolm figure. This is a Dimetrodon figure with a huge bright orange spine all the way down its back. This figure is the baby Brachiosaurus with the light green and darker green coloring on top. Here I've got a Monolophosaurus figure with the brown and gray detailing. From Jurassic World Dominion, this is another Atrociraptor figure. This one has the orange and the tan striping. I've also got a miniature Pyroraptor figure here. This one has the classic red and black coloring, along with a feather texture along all of its body. I've also got some more miniature Velociraptor figures in here. This first one has an action button on its back to swing its arms back and forth. And I've also got this bright yellow and brown Velociraptor figure too. It's got some battle damage right there on the side. This unusual figure is a Minmi dinosaur. It's got the spikes all the way down its back and on top of its head. This next figure is a baby T-Rex, and it comes with an action. When you move its tail, it chomps its jaw open and closed. And here we've got a miniature Pteranodon figure. Plus it has an action button on its back to flap its wings. Let's open up some brand new ones next. Let's see what this one is. These are a bunch of uncaged, wild pop-ups. First up, we've got Velociraptor Blue. Next up is a Dilophosaurus. There's also a Carnotaurus. And best of all, a Tyrannosaurus Rex. Next up, I've got a new Jurassic World Dominion Triceratops figure. Let's check it out. This Triceratops has the soft green body with the darker green and the orange in the front. Let's move on to our second bin here. This figure is the Spinosaurus from Jurassic World Dominion. It's got a button right on its tail to activate the jaw. Up next is the Ankylosaurus from Jurassic World Dominion. It has a super long neck and an action button to activate the jaw. Now here is a really cool looking T-Rex. This is a custom colored T-Rex to look like fire. And of course, it's got the button at the top of its head to open and close its jaw. Here is the Scorpius Rex figure from Camp Cretaceous. It's got two action buttons, one to activate its jaw and one to activate its arms. This is a battle damage baryonyx figure. You can check out that battle damage on its neck and on its leg, and it has an action button on its back for chomping. This interesting looking dinosaur is an Amargospinus. This dinosaur also has a long neck and some amazing looking spines on its back. Here is the Jurassic World Dominion T-Rex with the Battle Damage Edition. You can click the battle damage on and off just with the button on top. Here's a vintage Jurassic World figure. This one is actually a hybrid T-Rex. I think it's mixed with a Spinosaurus. Check it out. It's got some spines that pop out right at the top of its back. Next up, we've got the amazing Therizinosaurus from Jurassic World Dominion. You can use the tail to swivel its body around and use the action button on its tail to open and close the jaw. Next up, we've got a Stegosaurus figure in the light blue-green color. Plus, it has an action button. When you press down here, it swings its tail back and forth. Here's one of the largest Atrociraptor figures that I have. This one comes in the classic white with brown striping. I've got another extreme battle damage T-Rex here, but instead of battle damage shown right here, there's actually painted battle damage all over its body. Next up, I've got a Sarcosuchus figure. This dinosaur is really long and short, and you can use the tail to control the head. Here's another T-Rex figure. This one is in a soft brown with darker brown along the top, and of course the action button at the top of the head to operate the jaw. Next up, this figure is the Giganotosaurus. It has two action buttons, one to swing its torso, and one to open and close the jaw. This is the Indoraptor with the gold stripe and the black body, and it is a very posable dinosaur figure. This is the basic Velociraptor blue figure. You can move its arms, its legs, and its tail, and of course it's got the awesome iconic coloring. From the Hammond collection here, we've got the Baryonyx figure. It is very posable, and it's got some awesome coloring too. Here's a crazy looking dinosaur. This is a special edition Ankylosaurus figure. It actually has a removable shell. I've also got the regular edition Ankylosaurus as well. This figure is from Jurassic World Dominion. This is the Sound Surge Giganotosaurus figure. Check it out, it's another Sarcosuchus figure, but this one has some different coloring with the purple, orange, red, and blue. Here is another Ceratosaurus figure, but this one is in the brown and orange coloring. Let's check out that chomping action. Here is a vintage Jurassic World Mosasaurus figure. It's a lot smaller than the figures that are coming out with now, and it's got some battle damage that you can open and close right on the side. Next up is one of the largest winged dinosaurs. This is the Quetzalcoatlus. This figure has two action buttons, one to flap the wings and the other to open and close the mouth. This figure is super old. This is a Jurassic Park Spinosaurus figure. Here are a few small figures. These are both Gallimimuses. I've got another Dimetrodon figure in here. This one has an action. When you press down on its tail, it opens and closes its jaw. This winged figure is a Dimorphodon. Check out those fiery wings. From Camp Cretaceous, we've got a baby Ankylosaurus Bumpy figure. This next figure is from Jurassic World Dominion. This is a Miragaia. Check out those huge spikes coming out of its shoulders. Next up, we've got another classic Ceratosaurus figure. This one has the yellow, black, and red coloring. Here's another dinosaur with some huge spikes coming out of its back. This is a Sauropelta. This next little dinosaur, I believe, is called a Coelurus. It's got a tan body with some brown and some blue detailing. Over here, we've got some Monolophosaurus figures, one in a soft green color, and it's got some battle damage on the side, and one in a dark blue with some tan coloring. I've also got some more Velociraptor figures in here. I've got a Velociraptor Beta figure. Here's another spring-loaded, super bright Velociraptor figure. And a dark green Velociraptor in the stealth crawling pose. This next figure is a Carnotaurus, and this one is from Jurassic World Dominion. It's pretty unique because it's got the dark green body with the orange detailing, and it's also got a broken horn on the top of its head. Here is a Stygimoloch figure. It's got some gray and some dark blue coloring, and some huge spikes coming out of its head. Plus, this figure has an action. When you press down on its tail, it activates the head buddy. Here we've got another aquatic dinosaur. I believe this one is called a Plesiosaurus, and it has one action button on its back to flap its flippers. And last of all, we've got a baby Triceratops figure in the light green coloring, and some battle damage on the side that you can open and close. First, I just bought some Jurassic Park sets off of eBay. The first one is the Alan Grant with double-barreled Bola launcher from the Jurassic Park New Series 2. Let's check this out. So there's Dr. Alan Grant. We've got a variety of tools here, as well as a little dinosaur. And way up at the top here, you can see that it's some type of claw contraption or something used for trapping dinosaurs, it looks like. Now, I'm not gonna open this up because this is a collectible and I wanna keep it in this condition since it's unopened right now. But I still have another figure from eBay that I just bought that we're gonna check out as well. This is the Compsognathus, or at least I think that's how you pronounce it, codenamed Lasher from Jurassic Park Chaos Effect series. And this dinosaur is super colorful. It's got some light blue-green over its body with the black. It's got some yellow, it's got some orange, it's got blue right on its nose. So this will be super cool to add to my collection too. And as you can see, it is a combination dinosaur of a Compsognathus, a Stegosaurus, and an African tree frog. That is pretty wild. As you'll notice with basically all of these figures are discontinued, so you won't be able to find them new anywhere. You might be able to find them on eBay or something like that. But this first one is a Jurassic Park Allosaurus. And this figure actually has multiple pieces of battle damage that you can completely take off. And this front battle damage actually has multiple layers. You can take off the ribs to see the stomach underneath, and then you can just cover it back up with the skin, just like that. You can also remove the thigh on this dinosaur, see the flesh underneath, as well as on the tail. You can rip off a piece of the tail and see the bone and flesh underneath too. Back here, we've got one of the original Tyrannosaurus Rexes from Jurassic Park. This figure has some pretty unique coloring over its body. It's got the clay red with the black spots and stripes. It's got the lighter underbelly. It originally had sound effects, and its whole body is a soft rubber, which is a common theme with the older figures. Right here, we've got a T-Rex from Jurassic Park: The Lost World. This is the Thrasher Tyrannosaurus Rex, and it also has a soft rubber body aside from the arms and the legs. And with this T-Rex, you can actually wiggle the tail to control the face and the neck, move it back and forth. Alright, I know you've been keeping your eye on these huge T-Rexes on the side. This super colossal T-Rex is one of a kind, and that is because it is actually custom colored. It's got a light tan body all around. It's got some interesting shadowing and detail all over. It's also got some super dark red eyes and some interestingly colored teeth too. Those are darker teeth than what's normal. So while you may be able to get a super colossal T-Rex, you will not be able to buy one that is this color. Next up for the one-of-a-kind super colossal dinosaurs is this T-Rex. And this has some of the craziest custom coloring out of any figures that I've seen. It looks like a fire T-Rex. It's got the bright red over its belly and sides. It's got the glowing orange right next to the black, and then the black top. This is a super cool one-of-a-kind T-Rex. And for our final one-of-a-kind, custom-colored, super colossal dinosaurs is this Velociraptor. This, I think, has some of the best custom coloring out of any figure that I have. It is so detailed and so well done. It's got the black body with these brown stripes, and there's even these little gold specks along its brown stripes as well. My favorite part though are the eyes. These are incredibly detailed. It's like a gold eye, but then it's got red towards the center and then the black pupil. You will not be able to find another super colossal Velociraptor with this coloring anywhere. Here we've got a Jurassic Park Stegosaurus with battle damage right on the shoulder. This figure has a somewhat soft rubber body. The tail is especially rubbery, so you can swing that back and forth with those spikes at the end. And it has a very natural green and brown and light tan coloring all over its body, so it really blends into the jungle. This giant T-Rex, I believe, is the Jurassic Park Lost World Bull Tyrannosaurus Rex. This T-Rex has some pretty unique coloring with this green-blue color on the sides. It's got some light brown on its legs as well as along the top of its body. It's got some marble eyes that are green. And I don't have the piece anymore, unfortunately, but originally it was able to swallow, I think, a cage that had a man inside. So this thing could actually swallow humans or dinosaurs or whatever you want, and you can release it from the stomach right in there. Next up of my rarest figures is this Jurassic Park Lost World Pteranodon that was nicknamed the Steel Beak. This figure's pretty old and fragile now, but it's one of the few figures that has a fabric wing on it, as well as spring-loaded joints for the wings, so it can swing forward and it swings back, just like that. Next up is the Jurassic Park Lost World Parasaurolophus. This figure's in pretty good condition for how old it is. It's got the light tan body with the darker brown stripes along the top, and this figure actually has an action button on its back used for running. Here we've got the original Jurassic Park Triceratops, and this figure has some huge battle damage on its side. You can see some flesh and some bone in it as well. This figure also has the soft rubbery body like many of the super old figures, and it has an action that when you squeeze its stomach, it swings its head upward. Here is a dinosaur figure that, although it's more recent, it's still pretty hard to find and pretty rare. This is an extreme chomping Spinosaurus from Jurassic World. This figure has the dark ground body with the light underbelly and the red spine and face. And of course, it comes with the button at the top of its head for the chomping. Right here is another one of the original Jurassic Park Tyrannosaurus Rexes. This is a smaller figure. It probably only stands about 9 or 10 inches tall. It's got some battle damage on the side, and it has the soft rubbery body all throughout aside from its arms and its legs. This super bright dinosaur, I believe, is from Jurassic Park The Lost World and is actually a Chaos Effect Ankyloraniodon. This figure has some super bright colors, bright green and the bright purple, plus it's got a super bright orange eye as well. And there's actually a hidden action button on its back used to move its tail. Over here is another more recent figure from Jurassic World, but is still pretty rare and pretty hard to find. This is the hybrid Indominus Rex. It's got the bright red over its body, it's got some gold, and the classic gray color for the Indominus Rex. Plus it has a few action buttons, the first that you press down to stick out its spines, and the second to pull down the arm, and it roars. Check this one out. Here is another discontinued Jurassic World figure. This figure is fairly rare and is actually a hybrid Tyrannosaurus Rex. Check out these spines that pop out on the top of its head and on its back. Plus, another unique feature about this Tyrannosaurus Rex is this unique coloring right along the side of its body. And the action button that springs out the spines also activates the jaw. This is another Chaos Effect dinosaur from Jurassic Park. This is the Velociraptorix, and this dinosaur has some really unique features. What stands out the most to me are these wings right on the Velociraptor's arms. That's super interesting. And it's got these spikes right along the top of its back and its head as well. And this Velociraptorix has an action that when you pull the leg, it swings its arms up and down and its head moves as well. Next up, we've got another figure from Jurassic World. This is a hybrid special edition Ankylosaurus. And the most special part about this figure is that it actually has part of its shell that you can take off to reveal the normal shell underneath. This removable shell is super bright and reflective. It's got some bright green and purple in the spikes as well. And you can just plop it right back on. Next up in my rare figures, we've got the Jurassic Park Amargospinus. I think this figure looks somewhat similar to the unopened figure that we saw at the very beginning of this video. It's got the long neck, it's got the spines all over, and it's got a few action buttons actually that when you move the leg, it actually sticks up its spines on its back, on its neck, and it opens its jaws too. Next up is the Jurassic Park Lost World Chasmosaurus. This figure looks similar to a Triceratops. It's got many of the same features. It's got the horns in the front. And this figure also has an action that when you pull its leg, it moves its head up and down. This is another Jurassic World hybrid figure. This, I believe, is a hybrid between a Stegosaurus and a Triceratops. But it's also got some super bright and unique coloring with the bright blue on its side, the dark blue on its legs, and the gold right along the top and its horns too. Here is another Jurassic World hybrid figure. This is a hybrid between a Tyrannosaurus Rex and a Dilophosaurus. And once again, it's also got some super bright coloring with the bright orange on its sides. It's got some gold along the top too. This is a Jurassic Park Spinosaurus, and let me tell you, I think it looks a lot different than the Spinosauruses that Jurassic World is releasing now. But it's still got the huge spine along its back, of course, and it has some pretty bright coloring. It's got the bright green along its body with the gray as well. Next up is a fairly large figure from Jurassic Park. This is a Utah Raptor. It's got the orange body with the black detailing along the top and the lighter underbelly. And a nice detail on this figure is that you can actually move the claw up and down on its feet. Over here, we've got a few Jurassic Park Baryonyx figures. These are quite a bit different than the new Jurassic World Baryonyxes that are being released now. Their bodies are a lot more thin, they've got shorter legs, and it looks like they've got longer necks too. Next up, we've got two Velociraptors from Jurassic Park with different features. This first one is a lot smaller, and you can move the arms and the legs, but there's no action button. But on this second Velociraptor figure, there's an action button that when you move the leg, you can hear a sound effect. It's really quiet, so you probably can't hear it on the camera. But its head also used to move up and down as well. Here are some other interesting dinosaurs from Jurassic World. This is a Dilophosaurus with battle damage on the side, and it is super brightly colored. We've also got a smaller Spinosaurus with battle damage on the side that you can control by moving the tail around too. And for the last two dinosaurs of my rare collection, first we've got a Jurassic Park baby T-Rex with a broken leg feature. And we've also got this, I think it might be a Baryonyx, it might be an Allosaurus, it's kind of hard to tell, but it's from Jurassic World, and it's got the battle damage on the side, and the tail controls the head too. Let's start with the biggest figure in this entire bin. This is the Apatosaurus figure. This figure is ginormous. It's very similar to a Brachiosaurus. It's got the long neck, but it has a totally different face and a much stockier body, I think. But the figure itself is pretty cool because you can move all the legs, you can swivel the tail back and forth, you can move the neck back and forth too, and there's a surprising amount of detail on its face. Can even open and close its mouth too. This thing is ginormous. Next up, I believe released as part of the first Jurassic World movie, is this hybrid Indominus Rex figure. It's got the bright red coloring, it's got some special features, can pop out those spines, its jaw opens and closes, and as you can hear, there's tons of sound effects too. Way over here from Jurassic World Dominion, we've got an extreme battle damage Tyrannosaurus Rex. This figure is darker than a lot of the T-Rex figures that I have, and of course, it's got the battle damage slashes right on its side that you can open and close to hide completely or to show. That's really cool. Here is another giant T-Rex figure. This one might be from Camp Cretaceous, but I can't quite remember. But this one is a dark green coloring, which I love. It's got some black striping along the top, and it's got the action button on the top of its head to activate the jaw. Over here, we've got a Tarbosaurus figure. This figure has tons of spikes running down all the way down its spine to its tail. It's got a dark gray body with some red right underneath its neck and chin, and it's got some action features as well. It can open and close the jaw and move the neck. This, I believe, is the Parasaurolophus figure. It's got some really cool pink reflective coloring, which is a pretty special feature. You can move all of its limbs, and you can use its tail to move its head up and down, and in all directions. Over here, we've got another Parasaurolophus figure, but I think that this one is from the Amber collection or the Hammond collection. I actually can't remember. But it's got some pretty cool coloring and striping along its body. This figure is very poseable. You can even bend at the elbows and at the knees and at the ankles, which you can't do with a lot of Jurassic World figures, so that's pretty cool. Next up is the purple, orange, and blue Sarcosuchus figure. This dinosaur spends a lot of its time in the water. It looks a bit like an alligator actually, and it's got some awesome spikes running along its back, and it has some action features that you can use the tail to move the head around and open and close the ginormous jaw. Here we've got an Ankylosaurus figure from Jurassic World Dominion. It comes with sound effects as you can hear, and when you press down on its back, it actually swings its tail back and forth. This is the new Triceratops figure from the Hammond collection. It's It's got a whole lot more detailing along its skin, which is pretty cool. The coloring is a little bit varied along its body, but the best part is that there are many points of articulation. You can move all of its limbs in all sorts of directions, and I love the detailing on the face too. It's really cool. Here is the Sound Surge Carnotaurus from Jurassic World Dominion. It's got the all red body and of course the sound effects. Next up is the basic Spinosaurus figure in the dark green coloring with the red spine. You can move the legs and arms and tail, but you can't open and close the jaw on this figure. Here is the Camp Cretaceous Scorpius Rex figure. This one is a bit smaller than the other Scorpius Rex figure that I have. It's got a green body with some black detailing along the top, and you can move all of its limbs as well, even open and close the jaw. Here is a T-Rex figure from the first Jurassic World movie, and this one was actually custom painted, so you won't see this one much around, but it's got the red body with the black stripes and spots, and the yellow eyes, and an action button on its back to activate the jaw. Right here, we've got the Seats Microrerum figure. This is a pretty unique figure. I love how the teeth fit into the jaw perfectly. See that big tooth right there and how it fits in perfect? That is super cool. Plus, it's got tons of spikes along its neck and its back, and you can use the tail to control the neck and the jaw too. Way in the back here, we've got the Carcharodontosaurus figure in the tan, brown, and orange coloring. It's got some little spikes running up its head all the way to its tail, and it's got an action button on its back to activate the chomping action. Here is the Yangchuanosaurus from Jurassic World Dominion. So this is a newer figure. It's got the green body with brown detailing, and you can actually move its whole body quite a bit. You can move its torso up and down, and you can use the tail to control the head too. Right here from the first Jurassic World movie is the miniature Mosasaurus figure with battle damage on the side. That is really cool. I have quite a few giant Mosasaurus figures, but this one is still really cool and decently detailed as well. Watch out, we've got another Tyrannosaurus Rex figure. This one also has the battle damage on both sides of its body that you can turn on and off. Plus, the rest of its body is very posable as well. Next up is the Cryolophosaurus figure. I think this one might be from Camp Cretaceous, but I can't remember. But anyways, you can move the tail to move the head up and down, and you can move all the limbs and open and close the jaw too. Here's a couple more figures from the first Jurassic World movie. So these figures are pretty old. These are both miniature Spinosaurus figures. They both have the battle damage on the side. This one is more wildly colored, and this one's a bit more realistic. Next up, I've got a giant Dilophosaurus figure in the red coloring with these super bright frills and crown in the front. That is really cool. Here is a Pachycephalosaurus figure with the green and brown coloring and the battle damage that you can open and close on the side. This figure is from Jurassic World Dominion. It is the Rajasaurus with the dark blue coloring and the white on its neck and chin as well. Plus, it's got some spikes right along the top of its neck. And with this figure, when you press down on its back, it has a chomping action. This is another Scorpius Rex figure, but this is the basic edition, so you can't open and close the jaw, but you can still move the arms, the legs, and the tail around, and it has some pretty cool coloring and detailing along its body. Looks like I've got another Cryolophosaurus figure in here. This one is bright yellow with brown and orange detailing along its head, and just like the other figure, you can open and close the mouth, and you can use the tail to swing the neck around. Oh, look at this. I've actually got another Rajasaurus figure too, also with different coloring. This one is light brown with the dark blue coloring along its back and neck. And just like the other Rajasaurus, you can press down on its back for the chomping action. This is the Albertosaurus figurine with battle damage on its side. Check it out. You can see its stomach, then you can even close the ribs, and then you can even close the skin to hide it all. That is really cool. Plus, it's got some battle damage on its leg as well, and the rest of its body is pretty adjustable too. So this is a pretty awesome figure. This, I believe, is a Sinoceratops from the new Jurassic World Dominion movie.
It's got a bright yellow tail with a green body, and its eyes are all black, which is really cool. With this figure, you can press down on its body for the roaring action. Next up, I've actually got some brand new figures that we're gonna open up on camera here. The first is this Funko Pop Giganotosaurus figure. So this Giganotosaurus figure comes on a clear stand. It's got some interesting coloring. It's a lot different than the Mattel Giganotosaurus figures that I have. It's got the light gray coloring on the underside, this gray-blue coloring all along the top, so it's not very green like many of the other figures. And it's got these huge yellow eyes without pupils, which is interesting. Plus you can see a little bit of battle damage, some slashes and scrapes here and there, all along its body too. And we've also got the Dino Rivals Dual Attack Triceratops. This Triceratops is a light gray color. It's got some darker detailing along the top. And as the name says, it has two action buttons. The first is for the horn slashing or roaring action. And there's a second button for the tail whipping too. Whips its tail back and forth. It's pretty cool. Here we've got a similar dinosaur. This one I believe is a Spinosaurus. It's got the green and tan coloring with the tan underbelly and a little bit of orange on its frill in the front too. And this figure has one action button on its back to activate moving the head up and down. Next up, we've got a smaller figure. I actually don't remember the species of this dinosaur, so let me know down in the comments if you recognize what type of dinosaur this is. It's got an action button on its back to move its head back and forth. I've also got a few mini figures right here, both with different coloring. This first one is a greenish color. It's got some interesting detailing along its body, and the other one is red with white spikes, which is really cool. I think this one is definitely my more favorite one. Next up is the Zuniceratops figure, pretty similar to a Triceratops. It's got those two horns in the front, but it does not have the third horn, and it's got some different coloring as well. Over here, we've got a baby T-Rex figure. It's got the light green body with some darker green detailing, and it's got an action that you can use to open and close its jaw. This is a Carnotaurus figure from Jurassic World Dominion. It's a lot smaller than most of the Carnotaurus figures, but it's got some pretty cool coloring, very different from the other Carnotaurus figures, and it's still quite posable as well. Here's an interesting looking dinosaur. I believe this one is a Shringosaurus or something like that. I can't quite remember, but the most interesting part is it's got spikes, little spikes on its shoulders and huge spikes on its tail. That's pretty cool. Right over here, I've got a battle damage Coelurus figure that you can actually turn the battle damage on and off, just like the giant T-Rexes that we saw earlier. That's pretty cool. Here is a baby Brachiosaurus figure in the light green and dark green coloring, and it is pretty adjustable as well. You can move the neck, the legs, and the mouth as well. Right over here, this, I believe, is a Stygimoloch figure, and it has an action that when you move the tail, it has the headbutting action. I've got a few Velociraptor figures in here as well. This first one is the spring-loaded version, so you can actually have it jump into the air because its legs are spring-loaded. I've also got one, I believe, from the Amber collection, so it's a lot more detailed and a lot more articulate with its limbs, so you can move its arms and its legs quite a bit more. And I've also got this third Velociraptor figure with some pretty cool blue coloring. It's pretty unique with its coloring, and it's got an action button on its back to move its claws up and down. These next figures are Herrerasaurus dinosaurs. They both look pretty identical except from the coloring. This one is a light blue-gray coloring, and this one is green with brown on the top, and this one actually has battle damage that you can open and close on the side. And for the final figures, we've got Dr. Ian Malcolm, and we've got a Dracorex figure with all these spikes on its head. Plus, you can move its neck up and down, and its arms and legs as well.
Want to see more dino videos? Click the subscribe button now.